Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and as you can see, I have a few Fools and Magician cards here. So this all started because I had intended this month in Into the Wild Woods to sort of do an exploration, right, of the archetypes behind the cards. I have been quite behind in that idea. I think it was maybe a little bit overwhelming when I started to think about working it all out and the time that it would take. So I sat down and I thought, okay, I sat down to do the Fool card, but I couldn't help taking a leap actually to both of the cards, because there is such a leap, right, between the Wanderer and the Shaman, as we see in the Wildwood Tarot, right? The Fool and the Magician that we see in many, most other cards. They are named the Fool and the Magician, where we have such a leap. I particularly love the Wildwood here, where we have this innocent little chick just ready to take this first step off this branch here, right? It's a little duckling. And yet we have the... we have the jaguar here, which is such strong, beautiful, powerful energy here. So again, we have such this energy difference. We have this almost a sleepwalker here on the edge of a precipice, and we have this very precise setting things out very neatly within the castle and doing very intentional energy, and the very unintentional energy that we have here in the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. Same here, we have actually a very natural energy here with it, whether you're looking at the pelican or the wolf or bear, what's here, and this very human mental energy that's one is kind of going off of instincts, and one is very much going off and precisely trying to accomplish something of the Prismavisions here. Same thing with the Druid craft. We have this just very lovely going about the business of life in a beautiful barefoot carefree way versus this very powerful imagery of the magician and the Druid craft. So you have just such different energy here. Same thing here, and you almost have a sense of poverty, but still carrying on here. And some of the older decks, you'll have sort of a raggedy, like we have here in the Neoclassico. You'll have that sort of ragged beggar type energy, and then the much more everything is together, has things all set, much more powerful in both prosperity and power energy that you sometimes see in the older decks there. I particularly like this the Tarot of the Sevenfold Mysteries, where we really have this sort of, we have with the donkey ears, you have that sense of just not paying attention and foolishness, and the step that's she's going over it's just a step, literally. She has no clue, and even her arms are just kind of flailing about, versus that very together, very poised, very intentional energy of Hermes or the Magician card in this particular deck. So there's such a gap, I feel like, between the step, you know, from this stepping stone of the Fool to the Shaman here, the Wanderer to the Shaman, such that power, primal energy tapped into here. Oh, we didn't even talk about this one. I love this, that leaping, joyful energy here. And again, that much more electricity everywhere, intentional. Forearms are upright and held abroad and ready to like come down in this burst of magic. Just there's a very wide step between the two of them, that it really made me think. You know, we talk a lot, or I hear a lot, or I think a lot, maybe it's just me, about the major arcana being it's a view of the hero's journey, right? We have that Fool who's stepping out and then going through the major arcana and coming to that sense of completion at the World card. Now, Sometimes you actually have the Fool in older decks will show up at the end of the major arcana. So there is that understanding that actually you can't get to that energy of the Fool. By the time that you learn everything that it is there is for you to learn, then you can, the real trick is being able to step through sort of the World card and come out being able to face the world with your chest open to the rest of the world, which I think is really powerful energy, because sometimes that's really difficult because you've gotten all of these experiences, all of this knowledge, and then to be able to step outside of your own head and your own experiences and still be able to face the world fresh again is, you know, no easy task all the time. So I think that's also really interesting to play with those energies of whether the Fool is coming at the first or the Fool is coming at the end, and really that understanding perhaps that it is both. But when I was starting to pull the cards out, what I noticed is, or what I was really confronted with, is that if you put the Fool at the beginning, as we often do, often it is numbered 0. Now sometimes it's not numbered at all, but many of times it is numbered as 0, and so of course the next step is the 1. And I got myself thinking about how much of a gap there is between those two. You know, if this is sort of the beginning, we're going from this Fool energy to all of a sudden needing to come to that understanding that everything that we need within ourselves is, everything that we need is within our own selves, because in the Fool we often have the bag, right? And not actually not on many of the decks that I have out here, but a lot of times in many decks you do have the Fool with the bag on his back. He's carrying everything that he needs, right? Whereas when we get to the Magician, we realize we don't have to carry it because it's within ourselves. That's a pretty big gap. Right, that's a big gap to cross in many ways, and it's really powerful, because what I came to this for my own self, this realization, is that it's perhaps that first hero's journey actually takes place between the first card and the second card. You know, I grew up in obviously a religious, you know, if you follow my channel, you know that I grew up in a religious home, and so I read the Bible many times, and one of there's always was this theory that between the first verse in the beginning, you know, that beginning verse, and then it going on to the full version of creation, there's a gap. It's called the gap theory. And within that gap is where all of the dinosaurs and all those kinds of things would have taken place that aren't really talked about biblically. So there's this idea of this gap theory. And so that, of course, came to my head when I was looking at this. I thought, you know what, there's actually perhaps a tarot gap theory in which the space between the first, at least, and you know, we have to come to that understanding, and I'm just processing. This is just something that I'm talking through because I found it to be interesting. So this is not Kelly's written word, this is the way it is. In the beginning there was the Fool, and then there was the Magician, and in between were the dinosaurs. This is not a new tarot theory, and I'm sure somebody's talked about this, but this is just me mulling over what was kind of a neat experience for me, because I'm really connected with the idea of the hero's journey through literature. And many ages ago, as you all know, if you follow my channel, you know I'm a really big fan of Joseph Campbell, who is a mythologist. And one of the things that I love is his book, The Power of Myth. And so I've had this book for a long time. I took a class actually in college where we used, it was a mythology class based off of the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell's idea of or not idea, but his kind of coalescing of the hero's journey along with, and how that played out and was deliberately played out in the movie Star Wars. But this is a really powerful book. It's actually a transcript of and he has a book called, and I need to get it again because I've lost it along the way, but he has a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. Yeah, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And I need to re-get that. But he does have a section in here about the hero's journey. And it's that idea that we have so many stories, so many mythologies, so many tales, right, of this call. So you have this person who is just going along their merry way, and then there is this moment where something happens that kind of forces them on this path of initiation, a rite of passage. Something is going to change, and when they come out the other end of it, something has significantly changed, and they've become this very different person than when they started. And so that's something that has appealed to me because I'm a literature major. You see it over and over and over again in mythological cycles and folktale stories and books and movies, all kinds of things. You'll see this played out over and over again. And he talks about, this is again a interview with Bill Moyers, and I think you can find this, if I can find the links to it on YouTube. You used to be able to watch it on YouTube. I don't know if it's still up, but I'll see if I can find it. If so, I'll link it below. But this is a transcript of it, and I've seen the whole thing myself a few times. But Bill Moyers, so he's asking questions, and he asks of Joseph Campbell why there's so many stories of the hero in mythology. And Joseph Campbell says, because that's what's worth writing about. Even in popular novels, the main character is a hero or heroine who has found or done something beyond the normal range of achievement and experience. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. But the interesting thing is that there are physical heroes. There's all different kinds of heroes, and I'm really going to be simplifying. This isn't going to be a long discussion on the hero's journey. There's a lot to go into that, but there is a difference between sort of physical deeds and spiritual deeds. There's different kinds of heroes, and very often it's either somebody doing a physical deed or somebody doing a spiritual deed. But it talks about in the spiritual deed, which I think is more in the realm of what we're seeing with the tarot. The tarot hero's journey is this sort of spiritual progression of the soul. It says the hero learns to experience the supernormal range of human spiritual life and then comes back again with a message. So you have this hero who's gone off. Something has come about to disrupt that casual joie de vivre, dance through life, and he goes through a certain level of trials and things that happen, and then when he comes back, very often he comes back with a message. He comes back with the message of everything that you need is within yourself. You don't need the bag, right? Put the bag away. It's all within yourself. The power is within, right? You have that message that comes between there, which is really beautiful. He also talks about how that we don't always, well, he has a beautiful subject about motherhood is one of the ultimate hero journeys, which is really beautiful, but I won't digress. But he does, Moyers himself makes the understanding, or he makes the point that you have to move out of the known conventional safety of your life to even begin on this. So no matter what, it starts with that step into the unknown. He talks about how the usual hero adventure begins with someone who feels there's something lacking, something isn't quite fulfilled, right? And this person takes that step offward, right, on a series of adventures beyond the ordinary, either to recover what has been lost or to discover some life-giving elixir. It's usually a cycle, a going and a returning. But it's that basic motif, he says, about leaving one condition and finding the source of life to bring you forth into a richer or more mature condition. So you have the fool that embarks and then comes back older and wiser and knowing things. And we see this over and over again. I mean, look at all epic fantasy, right? You have Frodo leaving on Lord of the Rings, and by the end, when he is, scrambling and Samwise is carrying him right to the very bitter end of things, they both Sam and Frodo have become completely different people. They have had to mature and change and learn. By the end, they're very different people. They have come back older and wiser, battered and bruised as well. You see this in, Elfstone of Shannara series, which is an epic fantasy where, again, you have these youths that are just going about their business and life interrupts them, and they end up going on this long quest, and by the end they come back, and eventually the main character is able to, control the Elfstones and control the magic within. You see this over and over again in stories, and he does good. There's lots more to it. There's different kinds of heroes that are deliberately choosing that path, and other times things hit us on the side, hit us sideways, and we just have to go along for the ride, and we can either let it completely trip us up, or we hear that call, we answer that call, and we go off on this quest that brings us back. So sometimes it's a choice that's made, and sometimes it's made for us, and what are we going to do with it? So many things between this gap, right, between this and this, that is quite beautiful. The other thing, I love this because there is a kind of hero that fails, and he's usually represented as a kind of clown, someone pretending to more than he can achieve. And there are some times in which you see, I don't think I actually have any, but you do have some where, especially in older decks, where it is much more of an oafish, clownish sort of character versus a sort of a real beginning of the hero, which is also interesting. But I like this... the end here, I don't want to beat this over and over again, because again, there's so much to the story, to the hero's journey, and I'm not going to cover it all in this video, but he talks about how you'll see this motif over and over again in mythologies, and he says, you leave the world that you're in and go into a depth or into a distance or up to a height. There you come to what was missing in your consciousness in the world you formerly inhabited. Then comes the problem, either of staying with that or letting the world drop off, or returning with that boon and trying to hold on to it as you move back into your social world again. And that's not always an easy thing to do when you've gone off on this journey and you've learned all these things, to come back to the beginning again and still hold on to the message, hold on to what you've learned, can often be difficult. But I love that, because this idea here that you come to what was missing in your consciousness in the world you were at. But the problem is, are you going to stay, right? Are you going to take that and return with it? I think that's beautiful. I love also how he says that you go into a depth or into a distance or up to a height. I mean, how awesome is that? I just love Joseph Campbell. I'm sorry, but I love Joseph Campbell. I'm going to stop with Joseph Campbell for a minute once. I just wanted to say this, and this isn't even to the end of the hero's adventure. I mean, there's a ton of information about the hero's adventure that I'm not even touching on here. But he does talk about how in modern society we actually have a little bit of a disconnect from this hero's journey, and Campbell says that this is actually a problem, and that T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, which is an amazing poem if you haven't read it, describes this as sociological stagnation of inauthentic lives and living that has settled upon us, and that evokes nothing of our spiritual life, our potentialities, or even our physical courage, until, of course, it gets us into one of its inhuman wars. Then it starts talking about wars and battles and things of that nature. But the point is that when we're so disconnected from the spiritual journey and path that tarot does often talk about, it leads to all kinds of problems, because we're just kind of settled and stagnant, and we don't, we have to take those steps. We have to do that work. We have to face the journey, so that we can actually come out of it having learned something. And many cultures had special initiation rites, which he talks a lot about, the idea of initiation rites, and which is in microcosm of the hero's journey, that some of that's lacking. And again causes bigger sociological issues to when there becomes a stagnation of this connection with this journey that we need to go on to become more than what we start out, which I think is beautiful. But there's this, so for me, it just kind of went, when it just opened up this whole level that stands between the Fool and the Magician card that I think is really incredible to think about and to ponder, because the archetypes are miles apart, even though they're sitting right next to each other. If you're going from 0 to 1, or it's even, you know, a larger gap if you have the Fool at the end, because then you've got somebody who's gone through all of this and yet is still needing to then get back to the Fool. So it's really interesting to me. It was a kind of a ooh kind of moment, right? So while I have completely strayed off of the initial topic, which is to really think about the talk about or discuss sort of the archetype of the Fool and then the archetype of the Magician, and this is just this little video here is just sort of a wander into really thinking about that gap theory between the two of them, and how much of a step that really is, and what that, you know, our own, what lies between for us, where are those moments in which we have stepped off, we've stepped off the beaten path, and, you know, 6 months, a year down the road, all of a sudden we're coming back, having experienced things that have completely changed us and have brought us to a place of enlightenment, a place of, not full enlightenment, like, I'm not talking Buddha here, but the idea of having come to a realization, come to a knowledge, and then sometimes feeling a little disconnected from, right, how do you come back then to society after that and sort of incorporate this new you, this idea that we are multiple selves throughout our lives, that we're not, you know, we can look back and see where we've taken those steps from Fool to this new realization of self, and we can kind of map through our lives this idea where we've had those experiences that have shifted our perspective. And what does it mean when it hits us sideways and we get kind of sucked into a fool's journey or a hero's journey that we never even intended? What makes the difference between that and when we deliberately set out to find that knowledge, to come to this degree? You know, there's so many wonderful things to chew on and think about between the Fool and the Magician, that, I don't know, I just thought that was really interesting to me and thought I would just make a quick little video on it. And just see if anybody else has anything they want to add to that or talk about that, and add to the conversation, or just say, you know what, Kelly, you're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. You think too much. I know I do. I am well aware of that. But anyways, that's all I have for today, is just a little bit of a mulling. I was misdirected. I was going down a path in one way, and then I took a little bit of one of those wonderful mental, oh, let's follow this little rabbit trail over here, which got me to reading again the whole section on the hero's journey, which was a lovely path to go down. So I hope that this has at least interested you in some way or another. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and I hope that you all have a really wonderful day.